Middle school.
Last class tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go. Crazy grabbing steel.
Good evening. It is Monday, April 16th, 2012. I will call this meeting of the Norfolk City Council to order. This is an open meeting, and posted in the northwest corner of this room is the actual Open Meeting Act, made accessible to all members of the public. If you will, please stand, join us in a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll continue with roll call.
Toy.
Here.
Lange.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Brenneman.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
Saunders.
Here.
Okay, and under action, first on the agenda would be approval of the consent agenda as was provided you.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. If you
Your
will,
Honor, I will be abstaining as I have a possible conflict.
all right. That being said, the rest of you, if you would please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative. Councilman Faust abstained. Motion carries.
And next would be a request for approval of the full agenda provided you in your packet.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor.
Second.
I have a motion with a couple seconds for approval of the full agenda. Again, if you will please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
Okay. Under special presentations, the first is the proclamation for Elks Youth Week. I will read this in as, whereas the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks has designated the first week in May as Youth Week to honor America's junior citizens for their accomplishments and to give fitting recognition of their services to community, state, and nation. And whereas Norfolk Elks Lodge number 653 will sponsor an observance during that week in tribute to the junior citizens of this community. And whereas no event could be more deserving of our support and participation than one dedicated to these young people who represent the nation's greatest resource and who in the years ahead will assume responsibility for the advancement of our free society. And whereas our youth need the guidance, inspiration, and encouragement which we alone can give in order to help develop those qualities of character essential for future leadership and go forth to serve America. And whereas to achieve this worthy objective we should demonstrate our partnership with youth, our understanding of their hopes and aspirations, and a sincere willingness to help prepare them in every way for the responsibilities and the opportunities for citizenship. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Sue Fookman, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim the first week of May 2012 as Elks Youth Week in the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, and I urge all departments of government, civic, fraternal, and patriotic groups and citizens generally to participate wholeheartedly in its observance. Anyone here to pick up this evening? Seeing none, we'll move forward then with a recreation update.
Moving forward. Making a lot of progress until this weekend.
Yeah.
Slowed things down a bit today, but the contractor did start filling the pool today. They continue to make progress in the multipurpose building. The painter's been in there. The heating, air conditioning folks have got most of their ductwork hung. They're starting to work on some of the water piping at this point in time. The contractors are going to start pouring some of the pool deck tomorrow morning over on the east side of the wave pool. Most of the storm sewer main line got put in the last couple of weeks. Burbach was able to get resolution to the grounding issue that we're dealing with for the last couple of weeks, so that should be moving forward and completed here in the next couple of days. Over on the baseball football side, we've started to do subgrade preparation for the north half of the parking lot that's north of the Armory. A lot of that will probably have to be redone after the rain that we had, because it's taken on water, so it's going to be a little soft and soggy. So that's moving forward, but probably slowed down a week or so. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on in Tazuka Park, other than they've gotten started out there and done some dirt work. So with that, I'd answer any questions you might have about the recreation projects.
Anyone? Any questions? Comments?
One follow-up. We did have some hail damage down there. Most of the aluminum down there has taken a beating, particularly that to the north and the in the west. Some of those skylights have got some damage too. So we'll be looking into that here over the next couple of days and just see what the extent of the damage is and what the best solution to dealing with it are.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, then how about 25th Street? You want to give us an update there, Dennis?
Continue to make progress there. The south end down by Pizza Hut from Highway 275 up and through the intersection of Taylor has been completed. In fact, we yesterday sometime they changed the traffic to opened up that south end. It's all complete down there other than a little siding and some seating that have to be done, and those were scheduled for today, but probably didn't happen. So our next piece that we'll be concentrating on is from Taylor to Madison Avenue. So we'll be starting removals and storm sewer construction in that area very shortly. The bridge is gone, so they're getting started to do some work in there. Our trail loop will maybe closed intermittently here for a few days due to putting in some piling for the new pedestrian bridge. When we originally did the project, we thought we were using spread footings and would be able to do them right next to the existing trail, but they have to get down in there with a crane to drive some piles for the footings for the pedestrian bridge as well as the other bridge. So while they're actually doing that, there may be some intermittent times when you won't be able to actually make a loop around the park. You may have to walk and make a U-turn and go back. So, but
Okay.
we'll try our best to keep those times minimized as much as we can. So it's pretty much where we're at with that project.
Do you see that happening in the very near future, Dennis?
Yes.
Do you? Okay. All right.
Dennis, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Somebody called me today. The residences to the west and a little bit to the south of that home that was demolished going up the hill there.
Right.
Is there any plans to put a silt fence in there?
We can sure look at that. There's been some discussions about that, and evidently they didn't get it done from the sound.
Well, obviously, Saturday, I think, caused them a little problem, but the question did come up, too, if we had a half an inch of rain or an inch of rain with all that bare ground up there, if that's just going to go down and
There's been discussion
cover up the
about
neighbors
it,
down
and it does need to, if the water can get off the site, it needs to be dealt with. So.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Anything else at all?
We have a progress meeting in the morning, so that'll be one of our topics.
Any other questions? Okay. If not, then let's move forward to public hearings. There's a public hearing for us to act as a Board of Equalization to equalize special assessments for paving district number 495 on Oak Street and the Water Extension District 119 on Victory Road. So with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn as the council and to reconvene as the Board of Equalization.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, we have a motion with a second. Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
Okay, and with that being said, Dennis, are you going to talk to us on this?
I will
I
talk
have
to you.
opened the public hearing.
The first district we're going to deal with is paving district number 495. It's Oak Street over by the railroad tracks. Total cost of the project was $152,511. There was $33,700 of assessable costs and $118,800 of general obligation costs. With that, I would answer any questions you might have related to paving district number 495.
Okay. Any questions from this group yet? Okay, it is a public hearing, so if there's anyone in the audience that wants to come forward and speak to paving district number 495, as was explained by Mr. Smith, please come forward if you will. State your name for us.
My name is Chad Root again. I live at 601.
Chad, you're on the mic now, sir, so.
Live at 601 Oak Street there. Still, I guess, not clear of the assessment that I'm being charged as far as when this project started and way back in 2005, how neighbors to the east and to the south and so forth had more say in the road getting paved and them not paying for any of the road. Not sure, and a couple lots to the north there, one gentleman got a new house built for him. He's not being assessed anything. Another 10-person next to them, they're not paying for anything. Just wondering, I guess why this is, or, people to the east of us use the road also, and they had what I feel bigger voice in paving the road. Several of us there on the road and at the intersection made the push to close the road. I think the city had a lot to gain from paving this road by having the lots for sale, or that was what they had told us back then, that they were going to have lots to sell to the north of where I live. And I think they made a pretty big push after they voted to pave the road to get the water and sewer lines all put in. And then it sat for 5 years, and the road finally got completed last year.
All right. Dennis, do you want to address some of the questions that he's brought up?
I'll do the best I can. The role of the Board of Equalization is to determine whether the costs of the district are allocated fairly to the benefiting property owners. The Brunigans have property that is immediately adjacent to this property that has frontage on the street and clearly benefits from the project. The reasons for the creation of the district really are pretty much immaterial for the action that's being taken tonight. A portion of that property that's on the east side of the street will effectively have special assessments through the agreement that we have with the property owner due to right-of-way negotiations. They're not payable immediately. They're payable if they develop the property. So it comes through that agreement where those costs will actually be allocated to that property. City owns everything on the west side of the street there, so that's why that property shows up as a budding property, non-assessable. There's property there that the city could subdivide and sell for lots. It'll be property, more than likely it will be excess property to the city that we will be moving forward to divest ourselves of. But until the sewer, water, and paving were completed, that would have been premature. So.
I don't know if that's helped you to better understand the process.
I guess I find it hard to, that several people to the east of us, like I said, voice their opinion. I don't see why, I guess I'm not totally against not paying for some of the road, but I feel like it could be a larger area assessed for the paving of this road.
And so what I'm hearing us say is those that certainly benefit because the frontage are those that are assessed?
That's
Is that
correct.
a true statement?
That's basically what happens is
Okay.
is the folks that are immediately adjacent to the road or on a side street, maybe a house or two off of the improvement, are the ones that pay for it. The balance of the area that is all hard surfaced, those property owners would have paid for that hard surfacing through special assessments or through the purchase of their lots
At the time?
at the time that they were done.
Understand. Okay. All right.
Dennis, this is a little unusual too in the fact that it's an established neighborhood. Maybe you could kind of explain how, like in a new neighborhood, how the paving districts are set up. Where you go into a new subdivision, each lot is assessed a paving amount, right? Where this is already an established neighborhood, it follows kind of a different set of criteria.
Yeah, to
I
a
guess-
certain extent, in the new subdivisions, we're doing subdivision agreements, and the developers it's almost impractical to be able to get a loan without having that paving assessment paid off, or the sewer and the water. So the developers, for the most part, price their lots with all of the improvements included. So we don't get into a great deal of allocation of the side street assessments in those. They typically say assess it according to the so many foot for each lot, and on the corner lots they'll typically add a little additional to the frontage on those, but that's by agreement. In the established neighborhoods, what we do is we assess back a half a block or 175 feet, I think it is, and we divide that into, would have to look for sure, but I think 11 zones of 17 feet each or something, with the ones closer to the street paying a higher percentage of that cost. So as you step away from the intersection, your costs go down. And that is applicable to the property that's on the east side of Oak Street, immediately north of Maple Avenue. So that's how those were broke down. The other ones are on a straight frontage basis.
I guess we could have saved the city $152,000 by closing the road. So I guess in my eyes, it seems like the city had a lot to gain by paving this road, more so than I ever will. And, providing the Joneses with the new house and everything else, it just doesn't seem, I guess, fair to put it that why, we asked for the road to be closed, we asked for it just to be blacktop, then the railroad crossing became an issue. When there's a railroad crossing over here on, Park and 7th that never got closed, or it got closed and then reopened because someone wanted it open. I just don't see it fair that, we're getting assessed what we are when the city seems like they have a lot to gain from this by having the lots to the north of me.
Well, I think what I see us to be saying here is that everything that has been done accurately on behalf of the staff and the way that we are to put in place the assessment as far as you, a homeowner there.
I've got a question. So the paving that took place was from Maple to Spruce?
Yes, and then Spruce back to the west, almost to First Street. There was a 150 feet or so off of First Street that was already paved. If you're looking at the drawing, everything that's cross-hatched was paved.
So the assessed value here is just the street improvement, or is this the street, sewer, and water improvement?
The only thing that we're assessing here is the streets.
Street, okay. So was this the total street cost spread out over the 442 foot of city property and the 349 foot of Jones property then to get the final number for the rest of the homeowners? Is that, I know you kind of went into that a little bit, how you break it up per grid, but is
Yeah,
that
what we do
essentially
is we basically take the total costs of the district for the paving as well as the interest in the engineering, and we divide that by the square foot basis, and then we calculate how many square feet are in these various areas and apply that. So
that's the difference usually we're talking about frontage,
yeah.
and here you're talking about,
Well, we took the part that wasn't going to be assessed and calculated what those costs were based on a square yard basis. We also took the areas that were going to be assessed, calculated what those square yard costs were, and then divided it by the frontage that we had of the Brudigans and Saya. And then we did the side street assessment for the other one. But everybody paid the same dollars per square yard,
sure.
basically, for their portion of the street.
Okay. Now, does the street stop right in front of your house, or was it paved in front of you? I mean, does it pave all the way through? I'm just looking
It
at.
was partial, and our lot kind of sits halfway in that intersection,
Sure.
and so part of it was, and
Where?
Part, like half your driveway was paved and half your driveway was gravel?
it was a little bit further to the south.
A little bit further.
Yeah, so all my driveway was gravel, but to the south of the driveway was paved, part of it. How many other roads do you pave that you build people's, another house, I mean, that you redirect a whole road and, eliminate a person's house and build them a new one? How often do you do that? I mean, it just seems like somebody had more into it. I can't imagine that the city would go in and say, well, here's a gravel road, well, if we get rid of this house and we build them a new one, then we can make this road go through.
This was a unique situation. It's the first time in my 30-some years with the city that we rerouted a road like this, but it was not something that was done without a lot of public meetings, a lot of public input. We had neighborhood meetings, we had big council meetings, we looked at extending Pine Street, we looked at closing the street, we looked at various
I talked to
options.
a couple people that live on Maple, and I guess that's their own fault too. I mean, but they had no idea, that they were going to be assessed. So I mean,
I think that we had, I think we had meetings and had these potential assessment discussions with everybody that's impacted. I know that one of the property owners along the way there has changed hands in the many years that we've been talking about this. I think Vicki was a freshman council person when we started this project.
So is it possible to assess a larger area? I propose from Klug north, from Oak Street to the east to Box Elder.
Glenn, I'm going to have to turn to you to
Well,
say. I don't know.
Couple of things. The creation of this district back in 2005, whenever it was, or thereabouts, the creation of the district involved notice to those folks that are having the assessments at the end of that time frame come into play. So there was notice to those, and of course, that was a while ago, and of course, those negotiations, Dennis, you may have to correct me if I go off base here, but, the realigned and recreated Oak Street goes through what was the Jones House, and so all of those things that Dennis has talked about or addressed about or that you have mentioned in regard to the new house, in regard to some of the agreement with with property that is not going to be assessed until it was subdivided, or not going to be paid before it's subdivided, the collection of those monies for the assessments, what would have been the assessments, are addressed in there, and there's a whole bunch of things that went on here between relocation costs and between relocation costs that were due to them, the removal of the house, the value of the old house, all of those kinds of things. And all of those things entered into the policy decision that the then City Council made back in 2005 to do what has been done there and brings us in regard to this, as opposed to the extension of Pine Street or some of the other things that you mentioned. There was a lot of discussion about that. I suspect that, like many of those kinds of discussions, at the end of the day, there wasn't unanimity that we should embrace this or we should embrace that. So to some extent, there were, I suppose one could say that there were winners and losers in regard to how the traffic concerns in that area were ultimately addressed. Without the inclusion in the district, there really is no opportunity to, at the end of the time, expand the district and assess people that were not included in the district up front in regard to that. The proposal that you said to go from Oak Street south or whatever, by the same token, when those people, when those folks on Maple or whatever had their streets assessed, these other folks that are having it assessed here weren't assessed for those streets, even though they drive on them and so on and so forth. So it's just kind of...
But they voted to pave the road, and we were in favor of closing it.
As I said, there were winners and losers in regard. I mean,
I got a big L on my forehead. You know what you're saying?
That's not exactly what I meant, but there were preferences, one side or the other, and there were consequences for either side of that, and for reasons that. I know that there was lots of discussions about that from the then council that ended up with where we're at. And as Dennis says, it was a complex bunch of negotiations and the like. But the issue really between the council is before the council is, as Dennis said, the question of whether the boundaries of that district are set. They can't be expanded once the project is complete. It's just a matter of whether. What the staff has done here is applied the process, the formula, the whatever that says that in its simplest form, it says there's some benefit to your property by having the dirt removed, by having the dust removed, by having the road in its entirety paved, and the process that's been employed, and I think those various levels that Dennis talks about, they've been employed for a long time, come out to the $3,200, which was the assessment. And the point is that there's some continuity with that process, and there's a benefit to your property because it went from an unimproved road to a hard-surfaced, concreted road.
Would have benefited too by the road being closed, though. Living on a dead-end street.
My response to that would be that was one of the options that was kicked around in the area at that point in time, and let's see, I don't want to say that you lost that one back then, but
back to the loser part, I understand.
but the position that you were advocating at that point in time did not prevail would probably be a better way of saying it, because I don't want to go there with the.
Well, that's what I guess I don't, I guess I have a hard time understanding, if, say, like on 10th and Georgia, there's that gravel road that they dead-ended there at Georgia now. I mean, what if, people from 2 blocks around, say you lived on that gravel road, and people 2 blocks around voted, yes, we want that paved. There's 4 or 5 houses on that gravel road. Their voices aren't heard enough, I guess, and so it gets paved. And well, sure, everybody's for it being paved because they don't have to pay for it. But the people on the road that want it closed or have that intersection closed, because they have to pay for those improvements. And that's where, I guess I got a hard time, there's 4 people that live on this street, 2 of them aren't paying nothing, and 20 other people to the east of us said, yeah, let's pave it, it's a great idea, I use it every day. So now I got to pay for it, I guess is the heartache that I have over the deal.
I guess, Chad, I just wanted to address a couple things. And first off, if I was living where you are, I would be asking the same questions. This is, like Dennis said, is a very unique situation. Everything basically is by statute how it was handled. You bring up the square turn area. That's one of the first things that we acted on when I got on the council. And there was a push by the citizens in that area to pave that 1.5-block section. And I was involved in 5 or 6 of those subcommittee meetings, and all the neighbors were there. And it was the same rules were applied. There were abutting properties that had to pay that were a 1/2 block off a square turn. But at the end of the meeting, the consensus with the people involved was that they didn't want to pay for the paving. And it was about 50-50, but there was some people that were on retired fixed income and couldn't afford felt that they couldn't afford the assessment at that time. Like I said, in the same way, if I was living where you were, I'd be asking the same questions, but it's a very unusual situation. And the other thing that I wanted to leave with you is sometimes when people say the city has more to gain. The city is the 24,000 people that live in this town, and the city's already paying about $120,000 of this project. So in essence, the other 23,958 people that live in this town are paying a portion of that paving. I know that doesn't take the pain away, but I don't think if this situation was any different in any other part of town, the same rules would apply. I mean, there's consistent, we're not setting a precedent, we're not picking on Chad. This is just maybe at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's unfortunate that that's part of progress. I hope that you'll be able to recoup that if you ever sell your property, because living on an improved street would definitely enhance your property value, I would think. Like I said, I can sympathize with what you're going through.
Okay.
And thanks for coming, too.
Yep. Well, and I guess, the only thing it has improved is the dust, because they still find that road very appealing to speed and everything else. So I guess I'll
Leave us with that positive remark. I appreciate that too, Chad. Thanks.
ride.
Well, and again, as Councilman McCoy said, you were right to come forward and speak and certainly help us all maybe better understand the process a little bit, because I will tell you that the
Yes, I wish
explanation...
I would have understood it more back in 2005, or
Yeah.
been more involved in some of these special meetings, I guess, or whatever. So
Well, if nothing else, you can go out there and be the word of encouragement for the citizens to get involved when things start happening and around them. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Hey Dennis, I had a phone call from Troy Vaughn. He said he doesn't live on that street. I don't know if you know where he lives. Does he live like a house off?
Yes.
He would be the second house
Okay.
Second house.
east.
So you did go like around the corner and you do go down a house? He asked me how that, and I said I'd ask you, so.
That was the discussion I was having about the
Right there. So they want three houses.
side street assessment.
Okay.
And I found my notes, or my
Papers.
drawing.
Yep.
And
Okay.
I did meet with Troy Vaughn, and I explained to him how the budding property formula works. Larry and Kelly and Mark, I met with them, and they gave me some information to pass along. So I will pass that on to your staff, Dennis, that I appreciate the extra help that they gave in helping me understand. And
But we assess back a half a block or 187 feet,
Okay.
whichever is greater, I guess it is.
And there is a formula then
And
that
then
you follow?
we take that 187 feet and divide it into 11 pieces. And the one closest to the street pays 17.5% of the cost, and the one farthest away pays 1.5% of the cost.
Okay.
And it's allocated uniformly in between.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to, let's leave it on district number 495, and if you do, please step to, if you will, come forward. State your name for us. Pat, and your address there is,
201 East Maple Avenue,
okay,
and I'm right on the corner there.
yeah?
I had no clue I got 2 hours notice this was happening to me. I never received one piece of paperwork on it. I've lived there for 4 years. And all of a sudden they're doing this. And I don't even know how much it's going to cost me. Nobody sent me anything.
Okay.
Well, all of the property owners that are being assessed would have received a notice from the city clerk's office that said that there was a Board of Equalization hearing tonight at 5:30 p.m.
Well, yeah, tonight I got this letter, but when the project happened.
It was 2006 when the original project was developed.
I was not there then.
Well, the previous property owner would have gotten those notices, and it would have been, that information would have been there, whether at the point in time, I don't know how you acquired the property or whether you bought it or whatever, but if there was any title searches or any of those done after 2006, the notice of the special assessment district would have been showing up on the public record.
And another question, what was the point of the sidewalk? I've lived there, I've never seen one person walk on that sidewalk. 2 people live on that street and they've got that long sidewalk. And we got to pay for it.
Well, it's part of development that we're encouraging the development of sidewalks. So as that property was being developed there where the Jones house is that we started the sidewalk.
And that's a requirement of all residential areas, the sidewalk. So when that improvement was being made, I would assume that that's when the decision was that a sidewalk belongs in that residential area.
But there's not even a sidewalk going on the other side where there is homes, but yet there is that one going that way and there's only 2 homes.
Let's see. Well, I understand where you are. As I'm looking at it here before us. I don't.
Dennis,
I don't
do you know
know.
where there's a sidewalk there?
I don't.
Or are you looking at a map?
I'm in the process of trying to look.
The sidewalk's on the east side of the street.
Runs all the way to Spruce.
It runs all the way to Spruce to Jones's property.
Mm-hmm.
I use it about 4 or 5 times a week, so I know where it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just on this side.
One of the other things that happens, you said you bought that property? Did you buy the property?
It was an inheritance, but yet it was bought and
Okay. Well, one of the things, and part of the discussion that Councilman Merrill and Councilman Clausen and I were having here is that without going back and looking at the transactional documents in regard to that, title insurance, which would have, showed the inclusion in a district and all of that stuff, there should have been some things there, or if I'm a seller, I might file an affidavit that talks about whether the property, what kind of notices I've gotten. So I mean, certainly, at the time that you're there, if you say you didn't get those notices may have predated your ownership, and depending upon we talked a little bit about this property having this been kind of a unique situation. Maybe you acquired your property in kind of a unique way as well. But normally in that context, everything that's in place about what's filed of record, the affidavits that the seller utilizes, all of that kind of stuff through the acquisition process is supposed to bring us to being on notice, so that we're not surprised when there's when there's several thousands of dollars of assessments placed against our property, because the statutes do require that there be notice to the property owner, and then the property owner at that time, there's property searches done to determine who those folks are. They're given notice, and nobody goes and checks every week to see if the property's changed hands, but there's a record that's created on the record. The record is on the public record against that property that indicates that it's included in the district, in an effort to generate more questions in regard to that. So,
I mean, is this assessed to our yearly taxes?
What
Or
happens
the cost
with it?
of-
What happens with it? 7 years, is it, Dennis?
Should be 10 years on
10
the
years
paving district.
on the paving district. So what happens is there is an assessment schedule. Is that in here?
The assessment schedule is developed afterwards and sent
It's
out
not
by
an
the clerk's
assessment
office,
schedule.
so
There is an amount. Have you seen the amount relative to your property? Is what's on here, Dennis, the
$7,657
is the amount.
53 cents.
Now, what happens with that is that there's a time frame where, and then the ordinance, if the council passes the ordinance that's before it tonight, that ordinance provides for that being the amount of the assessment against your property, and it provides for, is the interest rate on that 5%, Dennis?
5%.
The interest rate provides for that to be in place at 5%. You have the option, property owners have the option to say, I don't want to pay 5% interest on that property, so there's a number of options available. One of the options is that within 50 days of the assessment, they can come in and pay off the whole thing if they're desirous of doing that and are economically able to do that.
I'm a cook and a bartender. I'll be right on that.
Okay, the second thing that happens with that is that there is generated, after the ordinance is passed, there is a payment schedule that's generated that basically takes and divides up that 7,600, Dennis?
7650.
Divides that up into 10 principal installments of $7,765 on an annual basis, and then shows what the interest is on that, and it's in place. There's in effect a 10-year payment period that's provided for the paving assessment. And Randy or Dennis, if I've misstated anything.
I think you've got it correct.
And so when does that come due for her?
The first 1/10 is due 50 days from tonight.
Okay, and then each year,
And then each year,
We-
on the anniversary of tonight,
she would get
would
another,
be 1/10
okay.
plus the interest for the prior year on the unpaid balance.
So like within 50 days, I got to come up with $700?
No,
Yes.
well, or pay interest on it.
Or pay interest on it?
Well, no, the first $750 is due 50 days from tonight.
Right, but
If she
they don't pay
chooses
it.
not to pay it at
If she
that
chooses
time.
not to pay it, then the delinquent interest kicks in at
Right.
14% interest.
I think the point, though, if I understood you right, you asked if it became part of your,
Taxes or, I
You're
didn't
right.
know.
Right. And no, it's separate and a part of.
It's a separate billing.
Separate thing.
Right. Separate, you're not paying it when you're paying your property taxes.
Right.
So somewhere between now and the next month and a half, I'm supposed to come up with $700? Probably right on it.
Okay, we're still in a public hearing here. Anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to this one assessment? Okay. Then I will look to Dennis and ask for paving district, let's see, the water extension district.
Water extension number
Please.
119
Yes, on Victory Road.
on Victory Road. Total project cost was $327,700. $169,380 was assessable. General obligation cost was $158,350.
Okay, again, a public hearing. If there's anyone that wants to come forward and speak to this issue. Okay, seeing none, then I will look for any questions that any of us might have to Dennis prior to moving forward here. Okay, that being said then, we need to adjourn then as the Board of Equalization, and I would ask for a motion to come back then as our City Council.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
With that, I need to close the hearing, but can we go ahead and vote on this, and
Yes.
then I can, okay. If you'll vote, please.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
Okay. Where are we here?
Number 25.
Then we need to,
All right, we're going to act on these one by one. Yep, okay.
On 20.
Yep, 5204.
Yes.
All right. So where we are now is we need consideration of approval of ordinance number 5204 levying the special assessment in the water district that we just heard of, 119. Do I have a motion for approval?
John Rod introduced ordinance 5204 on first reading.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay. Motion with a second. Is there any further discussion on this? If not, then we have a short title, Beth.
an ordinance levying special assessments upon the lots, parts of lots, lands, and real estate abutting upon and adjacent to and specially benefited by the improvements in Water Extension District Number 119 of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, to defray the cost of said improvements and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
All right. And with that, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5204 carries on first reading.
I would move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5204 on second and third.
Second.
A motion with a second to suspend and pass on second and third. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5204 carries on second and third.
All right, and then next I would ask for consideration of approval of ordinance number 5205, the special assessment paving district number 495 on Oak Street.
John, I would introduce ordinance number 5205.
Second that, Your Honor.
A motion with a second. Any other discussion? If not, Beth, short title.
An ordinance levying special assessments upon the lots, parts of lots, lands, and real estate abutting upon and adjacent to and specially benefited by the improvements in paving district number 495 of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, to defray the cost of said improvements and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
All council persons voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5205 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5205 on second and third.
Second.
We have a motion with a second to suspend and pass on second and third. Any other discussion? Hearing none, then again, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5205 carries on second and third.
Okay. Next, we have a public hearing to consider an application to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for a Nebraska Affordable Housing Program grant in the amount of $501,905 for a second-story housing rental rehabilitation fund. I will open the public hearing, and I would assume maybe Tina? Tom. I'm sorry.
Beat you.
Wow.
I beat you. Yeah, Tom Higginbotham, Director for the Economic Development District. Also here is Tina Engelbart, the Deputy Director. And Sheila Miller is also here with the Housing Agency, the Director there, so if there are any hard questions, we'll deflect them their way. This public hearing, yes, on this grant, the public hearing is very self-explanatory. It's about $501,000 total grant, $422,620 for the actual rehabilitation of the second floor. Then there's some lead-based paint dollars in there, and some housing management, and some general administration. I'd also like to really quickly give a little history here. About 2 years ago, through the HUD had some neighborhood stabilization funds available through the stimulus package. We, in conjunction with the city staff, the housing agency, worked with the state of Nebraska because Norfolk qualified statistically for some of those dollars, and that's particularly in the downtown area. So we put together an application a couple years ago to do this, had many meetings with the property owners downtown to find out who was interested in this program. Eventually, the state of Nebraska did not elect to apply to HUD for those funds. And so in the meantime, those property owners have continued to work with Sheila and her housing staff as, is there any funds available to help us do this? So finally, there's still some consensus there and some interest there to work with 3 interested building owners with 4 buildings to rehabilitate, or to turn these 4 buildings into 7 units. A couple of them are going to have 2 units. One's going to have 3, and then there's a couple smaller ones that are just going to be 1 unit. So we're looking at 3 building owners, 4 buildings, and then when we're done, 7 units. Last week, the state of Nebraska was here and did a preliminary walkthrough of the properties. Did not see any issues with those properties. Back a couple years ago when we did the neighborhood stabilization application, Scott Cordes back then and his staff walked through those properties to make sure that, there were no structural issues and those kind of things. So if something was to be funded, we can move forward. Those are a couple years old, so we're going to have those folks go back in there and just do a real quick update, make sure nothing's changed in the last couple of years. One other thing that I will let you know about this program, we're going to run the program similar to how we run the downtown facade improvements through the community revitalization program. Working with the housing agency and the city staff, what we're going to do is the property owners are putting up half the money for their project. So the grant dollars will be a forgivable loan to the property owner over the affordability period, which will be 5 years. So as long as those property owners follow all the federal and rules as far as rent limits, renting to low to moderate income families, as long as they follow those rules and there's no issues there, then at the end of that affordability period, those dollars will be forgiven. Kind of like the facade improvements. So just wanted to kind of point those 3 things out. And if there's any questions, we'll surely answer those.
I think you gave great explanation there.
We got one question. Where's the target area for the rehabilitation area? Is that?
It's downtown.
Okay.
And I'd also like to add, obviously, with the, those property owners have always kept up on the interest, and always talked to Sheila and her staff. But I think what's also kind of helped us along is that downtown housing study you folks used some of those community revitalization funds for, kind of, secured that there is a need for that. And that's another reason why these property owners are still interested and willing to commit to 50%. So we're looking at the downtown, the second floor rental. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom? All right. Well spoken, Tom.
Your Honor, I will be abstaining from voting on this.
Okay. All right. We're still in a public hearing here, so if there's anyone else that wants to come forward and speak to this or might have questions. All right, council? Any? If not, then I will close this public hearing and look for, let's see, where are we? Consideration of Resolution 2012-13, approving an application to the Department of Economic Development for Nebraska Affordable Housing Program Grant, as presented to us.
Your Honor, I would move consideration of Resolution 2012-13.
Second.
Motion with a second. Any further discussion at all? If not, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, Councilmember Clausen abstaining. Resolution 2012-13 is adopted.
Okay. Tom, wherever you are. Tina, thanks for having us back. Appreciate your being here. Moving on to the regular agenda then, consideration of approval of an agreement with Ken Burris Consulting Incorporated for insurance consulting services. I will ask for a motion.
Make that motion, Your Honor.
We have a motion with a second for approval. Any discussion at all? If not, Mr. Miller, you have something you need to say? Do you want to hear from Mr. Miller? That's unusual. Do we want to hear from him? I think there's been a lot of discussion, so.
This is just a continuance on of the direction the mayor and council gave us last spring, Your Honor.
Right.
So we're just following through with that with the same consultant we used the first time, and he'll get us to a point where we can bid our city's insurance. And he'll also give the withdrawal notice to alarm, which is a normal part of the procedure with our current insurance carrier. It doesn't mean that we're withdrawing. Councilman Faust wanted us to be clear, that doesn't mean we're withdrawing from alarm necessarily. It does mean if we go through the bidding process and a different insurance carrier is selected, then we would withdraw completely from alarm. However, if alarm is selected after that bidding process is completed, then we'll withdraw our withdrawal. So
Okay.
that's where we're at.
All right. Any other discussion there? Again, Mr. Miller, thanks for having his back. So, that being said,
Well, I would just say, if Shane, if I understand you right, we're protecting our position in LARM by putting this withdrawal notice in. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement, absolutely. You know, it allows the process to go forward and protects our position in the fact that we can still engage with LARM after the bidding process is complete if there's the successful bidders.
So the withdrawal is it's a technicality more than...
It is. It's a requirement that we need to do with our contract with LARM as it stands.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the other thing I'd like for people to note too is that, you know, this is what we talked about a year ago at this time. Mr. Burris from this document shows that, I mean, he's independent. He's not one of these insurers. All he does is this study in that way and review and setting it on up. And actually, his fee's quite reasonable at the 12.8. So
that's a good point, Councilman. I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, it really is an arm's length transaction for us. It keeps, you know, he's what I would describe as an expert in pool and in private insurance consulting, so he has a wealth of knowledge in both arenas and is able to ask the questions and delve into the bidding documents and set up a position where we can get as close as we can to comparing apples to apples, so the community of Norfolk gets the best bang for their buck and the best coverage document that we should have for our citizens' protection of their resources.
And I guess I would add one thing too, that I think that might be a reflection on that fee, is that he has a very good understanding of what our insurance, our current insurance is, because he's already done some research of what we have available. So
absolutely.
great discussion. I didn't mean to shut anybody off. So any other comments? Questions? If not, then I would ask that you please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
All right. And with that, are we ready to move on to consideration of approval to authorize Ken Burris Consulting to provide withdrawal notification to the League Association?
I will make the motion, Your Honor.
Second.
A motion with a second. let's have a bit of discussion on this. And I guess I would just ask, why do they do it, not us? Give notice. Just,
Why did they do it? Or
Yeah.
We just put it in there because he's our consultant, so we're paying him for that
All
service,
right.
and we're going to allow him to do it and keep it completely arm's length away from the city of Norfolk. I just think it makes it clean and pure that way, Your Honor.
very good. Just had to ask. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts? If no further discussion, please vote then for approval.
All council members voting in the affirmative.
All right. Next would be consideration of ordinance number 5203, amending section 2-5 of the code to update the city's comprehensive fee schedule. If you remember right, this passed on first reading at the April 2nd, 2012 City Council meeting. I'm asking for a motion.
Your Honor, I would introduce ordinance number 5203 on second reading, excuse me.
Okay.
Second.
Motion with a second. Any discussion at all? All right, short title, Beth?
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 2-5 of the official city code to update the comprehensive fee schedule, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, and with that said, please vote on second reading here.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5203 carries on second reading.
Your Honor, since there was no other discussion or no further input from the public on this, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5203 on third.
I'd second that.
Okay, you heard the motion with a second to pass on third. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5203 carries on third reading.
Next would be consideration of ordinance number 5206, amending section 24-110 of the city to create a speed limit of 30 miles per hour on 18th Street from Paswalk Avenue to 300 feet south of Imperial Road.
I'd make that motion, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, motion with a second, and I would say, Chief Meisner, you're here to tell us why.
Yes, Your Honor. We are proposing that we make a change on 18th Street as far as the speed limits. As it currently exists right now, there are several different speed zones between Paswalk and Benjamin. As you go north from Paswalk, you've got a 30-mile-an-hour zone until you reach Phillip. At Phillip, it becomes a 25 until you get up over the hill to Kenningstein, which then becomes 35 until you get up to Maple, and then it becomes 25 as you go past the wide-open fields for a block and then get to the housing. This came up after the stop sign was removed at the four-way stop there at the 18th and Paswalk, and there was concern about the speeds going through there. So after looking at it, some discussion, a proposal was made to change it to 30 miles per hour. I know we had a little bit of concern leaving it at 35, approaching where the stop sign used to be, and then going over the hill down to the traffic light at the bottom of the hill there. It was suggested maybe we just do 30 straight across the board. Yet when I talked to my staff, we were concerned, especially up in the Bel Air Road area, the Bel Air School area, where you have houses, dense residential area, school traffic, and then you have the hills and curves that reduces visibility. We thought it was really important to leave that at 25. So the proposal is to leave it from Benjamin down to just south of where the housing ends on South 18th Street. That's about 300 feet south of Imperial Road. And then from that point on south to Paswalk, it would just remain 30 miles an hour through there. We think with the increased traffic that's going to be on there now for the next few months because of the 25th Street project, it's important to have a smooth flow of traffic without the changing in speed limits. We also felt that it was important to slow it down just a little bit. And the police division plans on doing quite a bit of monitoring of that particular street because of the increased traffic there. So we want to make sure that the motorists have a fighting chance to obey the limits there as they go down 18th Street. So if there's no concerns, our request would be to go ahead and pass that on all 3 readings tonight so that we could get it signed, and then we can hopefully start the education process with the public. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Could you tell us approximately how far north of Maple is that, the entrance to Skyview Lake?
It would be, I can tell you how far south of Imperial Road it is.
No, that says 300 feet.
And very good. What it is we tried to look at, we looked at the aerial map of that particular area, and there's just south of the housing where it ends and you get to the open fields there by the cemetery and that, there are some trees and there's a little bit of green area, and it would start actually right there before you actually reach the first houses there. We thought that was an appropriate place to actually start the 25-mile-an-hour speed zone. One of the concerns that was brought to our attention was that there didn't seem to be any type of natural indicator as far as either topography or building that would indicate a natural change in speed. And we felt that as you're approaching those houses from the south, you can actually, you're driving by a fairly open area, you've got housing ahead of you, that seems to be a natural place to go ahead and make the stop. And we wanted to do it far enough south so that even the vehicles that are getting there at 30 and then starting to slow down, hopefully would be at around that 25-mile-per-hour zone or speed when they actually got to where the houses are and approaching Imperial Road, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And Chief, don't you have a school speed limit down there too that goes to 20, so that would kind of moderate you into 20?
Yes.
Be ready for it anyhow.
And that would be just when children are present.
Right.
And so it's when school's in session, it is something that may be effective, but there's so much of the day and in the evening and weekends and whatever that there are no children actually present in school. And so we really think maintaining the 25 is important, but then we still have that 20-mile-per-hour school zone speed limit for when students are present.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
Jim, it's 960 feet from Maple to Imperial.
So it's 600 feet when this
About
starts.
600 feet.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions on this at all? Okay. Then I guess we'll look for a short title on this, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 24-110 of the official city code to provide for a speed limit of 30 miles per hour on 18th Street from Paswalk Avenue to 300 feet south of Imperial Road, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5206 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5206 on second and third.
Second.
You heard the motion with a second to suspend and pass on second and third. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5206 carries on second and third.
Okay. Lastly, but certainly not least, Mr. Gates, we're looking to you to give us presentation, the comprehensive annual financial report.
Yes, Your Honor. There are actually 3 financial reports under enclosure 32 in your agenda packets, which begins on page 174 of your agenda packets. The CAF, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is the first one, and it's followed by the single audit reports, and then finally the auditor's management letter. As I stated, the first report's the CAF, or that's on pages 174 to 305 of the agenda packets. Pretty similar in format to prior years. We did, however, implement Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement 54 this year, and that makes changes to fund balance reporting. We used to just report reserved and unreserved fund balance. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board thought we needed to chop and dice that up a little bit finer. So we now have 5 classifications of fund balance, and if you look at page 32 of the CAFR, you can see how those are laid out in the City of Norfolk's case. The first category that we're reporting now is non-spendable, and that's items that by their very nature aren't subject to expenditure, and this would be things such as prepaid expense and inventories. The next category is restricted, and that's items that can only be spent for specific purposes due to external constraints. A good example of this would be the City Highway Allocation Fund money that can be used for streets. That's a restricted fund balance. Then we come down to committed fund balance, which are amounts that can only be used for a specific purpose because of formal action you as a council took. A good example of this that we're just running into this year is the occupation tax that you approved at the time we issued the $16.4 million of voter-approved recreation bonds. You said at that point in time that tax would go to pay debt service on those bonds. So that isn't an external restriction, that's a council restriction, and that's reported. Those funds that aren't spent yet are reported as committed fund balance. And then the other category, you have the fourth category of somewhat restricted fund balance is assigned fund balance. And these are amounts that are intended for a specific purpose, but they don't meet the requirements of either restricted or committed fund balance. An example of this would be the way we do our general fund capital outlay that's in the capital improvement program. We're trying to smooth out those transfers, and as part of the long-term financial plan process, we're trying to make a relatively even dollar amount, basically adjusting that for inflation every year as we go along to fund those capital outlays so we don't have big ups and downs in that general fund capital outlay expenditures. Well, some of those monies are going to go to the capital project fund and not be spent for a while. While those monies are sitting there, they're considered to be assigned. That's the least restrictive of these restricted categories of fund balance. So that's a perfect example of assigned fund balance, and everything else is considered unassigned, and that's basically money that you can spend without specific restrictions on it. The CAFR has citywide financial statements, and I think that's probably the best place to go to get a broad overview of the city's financial condition. And those are on pages 30 and 31 of the CAFR. There's 2 of them, Statement of Net Assets and Statement of Changes in Net Assets. And that'd be 210 and 211 of the agenda packets is where those are. And these are on a full accrual basis. The Statement of Activities on page 31 is the kind of like the city's income statement on a full accrual basis. And it shows you when you look at that we had about $4.7 million of net income. $3.5 million of that came from the governmental activities. $1.5 million of that was due to special assessments that were levied last year, primarily for the downtown improvement project. We also had $800,000 of those occupation tax monies I just talked about that we had in our hands but we hadn't spent yet, and that was contributing to the increase in net income we had. And finally, the group health fund had a good year. We had less claims than last year, and they had a net income than the group health fund of about $800,000. So that's how we got to that $3.5 million of governmental fund increase in net assets. The rest of that, the other $1.2 million is in the business type activities, and that's where we report the city's 3 enterprises funds, the water, sewer, and solid waste funds. All 3 of these enterprise funds had a increase in net assets or net income. 1.1 million of that was in the water and sewer funds, and we've been setting the rates for those funds to fund the large capital improvements shown in the water and sewer master plan over the next decade, and that's resulted in net income in all 3 of those funds, but primarily the water and sewer funds. And when you look at the statement of activities on page 30 of the CAFR, you can see that the largest increase in general revenues last fiscal year was the occupation and franchise tax that you guys voted for to pay for the recreation bonds. That's 2% on food and alcoholic beverages and 4% on motels. That added about $1 million to our net income during the year. Second largest increase was also related to voter approved action, which was the creation of the LB 840 Economic Development Plan. You'll notice property tax went up about $400,000 because of that. And the third largest increase is in use of property, which is almost entirely the MPPD lease revenue. They've been increasing their rates, and we get 12% of MPPD revenue for our city-owned electrical system as lease revenue, and that's where that's reported. The largest general fund revenue source is sales tax, and that's about 40% of general fund revenues. And as we've been talking about since about 2000, that's not grown a whole lot. It's been relatively flat, and it continues to be relatively flat. As you can see, it goes from about 6.9 to a little over $7 million, increasing about 2%. Second report in the agenda packets is single audit reports, and like I said, those are really three separate reports, and that begins on page 306 of the agenda packets. The first report is a supplementary schedule of federal financial assistance. That's on pages 309 and 310, and we spent about $1.1 million this year in federal funds compared to $1.2 million last year. The remaining two single audit reports are the report on internal control over financial reporting and the report on the city's compliance with major federal program requirements. All three of those are clean reports except for the internal control finding, which is a finding we have every year anytime we have any audit adjusting entries proposed, which you usually have those, almost all cities have those. That generates a finding. And other than that expected finding, those are clean reports. And the last report in the agenda packets is the required communication from the auditors, or what we used to call the management letter, and that's on page 318 of the agenda packets. And this talks about the auditor's responsibilities under generally accepted accounting standards, and except for the proposed auditor adjustments I just referred to as a clean report. There's no disagreements with management noted or other difficulties the auditors reported in doing the audit. Answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions at all, Council? I tell you, Randy, that's a lot of knowledge you have there, and I respect that. And like I say, a lot of information. Appreciate the presentation. I don't see any council member with any questions at this point. So, seeing nothing further on the agenda.
Nope.
Dennis?
I'd like to make one comment. NPPD has a series of meetings across the state that they're going to be talking about. It's called their Generation Options Analysis. They're coming to Norfolk May 1st from 2 to 8 p.m. at Divots Conference Center. It's kind of an open house type thing. They've got 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 stations there where you can get various information about their generation mix and the issues that are facing them today and what they're projecting over the next a number of years. It will be used to develop what they call their integrated resource management plan for what they're going to be building their generation for the next, I think it's a 20-year window they look at, that they update every 5 years. I would encourage the elected officials and any citizens to take an opportunity to, one, get some information about where the electricity comes from and that we so much like when we flip the switch, it's there, and provide input to help with how those resources are going to be developed over the next number of years.
I think that's a great point, and appreciate you bringing that forward. I think MPPD has really reached out to us as elected officials to try to include us in the process, and so I only can encourage as well that maybe you find some time to stop in. And again, sincerely, some appreciation to MPPD for keeping us involved in the process. So,
what date was that again, Dennis?
It's May 2nd from 2 to 8 in Norfolk.
Is it May 1st or May 2nd?
May 2nd, Wednesday. At least that's the looking at an email that just came today. There's some others in the neighborhood if you, that are available. I'm sure that all of the times that they've got across the state will be on nppd.com, which is their website. If you are interested, there's Columbus and South Sioux City have been added, Kearney, Lincoln, O'Neill, Aurora, McCook. So they've got several of them around the state.
And again, it's just an open house, free to come anytime between the hours of 2 and 8,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Need to plan on at least an hour or so to be able to get the information that they'll have.
Great. Okay. With that, nothing further, we are adjourned.
Interesting.